If you're past 60, this single sweet and juicy habit might subtly elevate your stroke risk overnight without any alert, no signs, and no discomfort. You head to sleep feeling perfectly okay, yet come morning, your words are mumbled, your equilibrium has vanished, or one side of your face simply won't respond. As a neurologist, I've witnessed way too many elderly people endure strokes that caught them completely off guard. Not due to tobacco use, not from junk food, and not from inactivity, but from an element they thought was beneficial. Fruit. That's right, fruit. Daily, countless older folks consume fruit assuming it's great for their cardiovascular system, minds, and gut health. And although numerous fruits do promote sound aging, certain ones, particularly if consumed at improper times or quantities, can silently cause damage. They cause your glucose levels to surge, dry out your neural tissue, or clash harmfully with your drugs. And the most alarming aspect is that nobody ever alerts you. Today, I'm going to guide you through 9 everyday fruits that might be heightening your chances of stroke, cognitive decline, or even a cerebral hemorrhage, particularly if you're beyond 60. Have you ever pondered whether your wellness routines could be working against you? If that's the case, you must listen to this, and I assure you it could potentially preserve your life. Prior to jumping in, if you haven't subscribed already, I suggest you press that subscribe button and activate the notifications so you won't overlook any future wellness advice tailored for you. If this video appeals to you, enter the number 1 in the comments section. If it doesn't, input 0 to inform me on improving the content for you. 1. Bananas. Excessive potassium delivered rapidly. Bananas. In my role as a neurologist, I've encountered plenty of unforeseen strokes. However, nothing troubles me quite like those apparently benign routines that stealthily pave the way to catastrophe. And surprisingly, bananas rank among those concealed threats. You've likely heard throughout your years that bananas make an ideal bite. They're tender, simple to process, packed with potassium, and even promoted as beneficial for the heart. And for a typical person in their 30s or 40s, that could hold true. But after turning 60, the dynamics shift entirely, particularly how your renal system, vascular network, and cardiovascular organ manage abrupt variations in elements such as potassium. Allow me to clarify this straightforwardly. With advancing years, our renal function naturally decelerates. It doesn't process as effectively, particularly if you're managing elevated pressure, diabetes, or if you're using widespread treatments like ACE inhibitors or diuretics, those fluid reducers. This implies that potassium, which bananas are brimming with, might start accumulating in your circulation. Then what occurs? Your cardiac muscle begins to falter, your vasculature contracts, and the gravest outcome is that it generates thrombi in regions where circulation ought to proceed smoothly. Within the cerebral area, such a thrombus can halt operations in mere moments. I'll always remember one of my cases, Mr. Raymond, age 66, a former woodworker from Ohio. He stayed fit, mentally alert, and valued nutritious eating. Each dawn, he'd add banana slices to his porridge and swallow his hypertension pill alongside citrus juice. It was a pattern he'd maintained for more than 12 months. Yet one dawn, his spouse discovered him fallen in the lavatory. He was unable to shift his left limb. His articulation was impaired. In the medical facility, imaging displayed a minor, yet catastrophic, cerebrovascular incident. His serum potassium was alarmingly elevated, disrupting his cardiac cadence and initiating thrombus development during the night. He was unaware that merely 2 bananas daily, paired with his therapy, were steering his physiology into hazardous ground. This is the detail that most elderly individuals never learn. You don't require such quantities of potassium, neither from additives nor from several fruit helpings, and absolutely not in a single go. A single sizable banana holds more than 450 milligrams of potassium. That's sufficient to disrupt your physiological equilibrium if your renal function isn't optimal. Should you consume that banana in the evening, when your blood flow diminishes, your fluid levels decrease, and your treatment remains potent, it brews an ideal tempest. Rigid conduits, viscous plasma, and a thrombus that could deny you any further opportunity. Therefore, what actions should you take if you're beyond 60? Particularly if you use cardiac or hypertension therapies. Restrict to just half a banana daily, consumed in the forenoon, and invariably alongside protein such as strained yogurt or seeds to moderate the uptake. Forgo the blended banana drinks, baked banana goods, and definitely steer clear of them prior to retiring. And above all, consult your physician regarding how potassium-abundant items mesh with your remedies. Your existence could hinge on it. Since the reality is this, elements once nutritious for your form may no longer be secure, not absent a grasp of the complete scenario. And if bananas astonished you, hold on until you discover what grapes, yes, those petite, delectable grapes, are inflicting on your glucose, your cerebral conduits, and your susceptibility to covert swelling. The revelation I'm set to share in the upcoming segment will probably transform your snacking approach indefinitely. If you're continuing to view and deeming these revelations useful, kindly post the numeral 1 in the comments to indicate your engagement. Now, onward to item number 2. 2. Grapes. A minuscule parcel packed with sugar explosives. Grapes. Delectable, succulent, invigorating. A morsel that appears as blameless as a gentle wind on a vernal afternoon. They're invariably present on the fruit display, in your grain dish, or presented post-Sunday meal with the youngsters. But suppose I informed you that for individuals past 60, particularly those harboring concealed circulatory problems or fluctuating glucose, grapes could serve as a hushed catalyst for cerebrovascular events? It's straightforward to overlook that grapes consist of dense sweetness encased in a fragile exterior. A lone tiny grape might seem innocuous, but ingesting merely a fistful, especially the pitless, ultra-sweet types prevalent in United States markets, can unleash a rush of innate glucose and fructose directly into your veins. And for maturing neural and vascular structures, that elevation carries a substantial penalty. As years accumulate, our forms grow less adept at regulating glucose. Our insulin reaction lags, our vasculature turns more delicate, and upon rapid glucose elevations, it doesn't merely burden your glandular organ, it incites swelling within the sensitive linings of your conduits, encompassing those supplying your cerebrum. Once those conduits inflame, they start to rigidify and constrict. Gradually, the vessel's interior can rupture on a tiny scale, and there, thrombi commence to develop. You might not sense it, you might not detect it in standard examinations, but your physiology is discreetly fostering the ideal setup for a covert cerebrovascular incident. Permit me to recount Mrs. Jeanette Morris, 80 years of age, a former educator from Missouri. She took pride in a natural lifestyle, no carbonated drinks, no refined edibles, consistently opting for fresh produce. Her preferred mid-morning indulgence, an ample serving of crimson grapes. She'd munch them amid perusing the newsprint or viewing broadcasts, at times consuming almost 2 measures without a second thought. Then, one afternoon, she observed her sight dimming as she penned a greeting note. Seconds later, her grip quivered and she couldn't recall the term felicitations. Her offspring hurried her to medical care, suspecting a cerebrovascular event. And indeed it was, a temporary ischemic assault, frequently termed a petite stroke, stemming from a thrombus that momentarily obstructed flow to her cerebral left hemisphere. Her analyses indicated abrupt glucose elevations near noontime, and her A1C, the extended glucose indicator, had edged into pre-diabetic territory, a development she hadn't anticipated. But even more indicative was the persistent, mild swelling in her circulatory framework, probably aggravated by prolonged high-sugar produce consumption, lacking protein or roughage for equilibrium. This is what I hope you grasp. Even nutritious items can turn hazardous absent proper framework. When beyond 60, the moment of intake and the accompaniments gain equal significance to the item itself. Grapes process swiftly. They propel sweetness coursing through your circulation. And if consumed solo, particularly amid fluid deficit or tension, your form enters a phase where plasma viscosifies, conduits narrow, and coagulation likelihood rises. You won't perceive it immediately, but evening by evening, week upon week, it accumulates until the instant it erupts. Hence, I now advise my elder clientele, avoid grapes on a vacant abdomen. Never in copious quantities. Combine with protein, several seeds, a portion of dairy, and consistently cap servings at a modest cluster, ideally amid vigorous daytime periods when your form can metabolize the sweetness. And if diabetic or using hypertension remedies, omit them altogether, barring physician approval. Since what appears a benign indulgence can gradually deprive you of equilibrium, recall, or autonomy. And regarding delectable yet perilous, there's a warm climate produce many elders adore that exceeds mere glucose elevation. Its tartness, its catalysts, and its evening impacts on the cerebrum could astonish you. Let's discuss pineapple, and the reason your preferred after-meal delight might be impairing your neural function as you rest. 3. Pineapple. The blend of acid and sweetness. Pineapple. Pineapple possesses a quality that evokes a ray of sunlight in each morsel. Delectable, zesty, exotic. Numerous of my elder patients relish it as a remorse-free indulgence post-evening meal, presuming it's airy, innate, and laden with catalysts that facilitate processing. But what the majority of elders overlook, and what troubles me profoundly as a cerebral specialist, is the manner in which this produce, when ingested at unsuitable moments or states, can evolve into a hushed hazard for cerebrovascular incidents, notably during the night. Pineapple harbors bromelain, an innate catalyst capable of dismantling proteins within your form. In modest quantities, bromelain might assist processing, but in surplus, particularly merged with specific therapies, it can meddle with coagulation, diminish platelet activity, and provoke erratic hemorrhage or thrombus development. For persons past 60 featuring inherently slimmer vasculature and reduced metabolic rate, that disequilibrium can yield grave repercussions. And overlook not the sweetness. One measure of pineapple delivers more than 16 grams of innate sugar, prompting a swift glucose elevation. Dissimilar to small fruits or pomes, pineapple boasts an elevated glycemic measure, signifying it inundates the veins with sweetness promptly. And when taken later in the day, that elevation serves no energetic purpose. It merely circulates, burdening your conduits during repose. Yet the most disregarded peril of them all, the tartness. Pineapple ranks among the most tart produces in the U.S. regimen. It can chafe the throat passage, initiate hushed regurgitation, and in certain elders, this regurgitation happens sans the usual scorching discomfort. Rather, it induces minute inhalation and nocturnal respiratory alterations, which link to diminished cerebral oxygenation amid slumber and heightened susceptibility to dawn cerebrovascular incidents, the deadliest variety. I once managed a case involving Mrs. Clara Hughes, 77, a former choral leader from North Carolina. She remained energetic, keen, and devoted to pristine consumption. She shunned refined confections and substituted her standard sweets with segments of raw pineapple post-dinner. For over a year, this ritualized her evenings. Then one dawn, she arose hazy, bewildered. Her offspring observed her mumbling and inability to steady while ambulating. Imaging disclosed a petite posterior flow cerebrovascular event, impacting her steadiness and articulation. Her analyses indicated raised glucose, traces of nocturnal regurgitation chafe, and platelet anomalies. The offender, not a solitary element, but an ideal tempest, forged by her evening pineapple routine. Tart regurgitation, sweetness elevations, and bromelain's influence on coagulation. It was a produce she deemed supportive, yet it almost pilfered her self-reliance. Clara's situation isn't unique. For elders, processing decelerates, conduit walls attenuate, and repose turns more delicate. Merge that with tart, high-sweetness produce nocturnally, and you hazard conduit contraction amid relaxation, precisely when the cerebrum stands most exposed. And indeed, in suitable scenarios, it generates thrombi discreetly, preparing for a cerebrovascular incident amid your slumber. Thus, the lesson? If pineapple delights you, savor it sooner in the day in limited quantities, and never on a vacant abdomen. Shun pairing with anticoagulation therapies absent physician counsel. And crucially, abstain pre-retirement. Your cerebrum requires steadiness, not shocks amid repose, since at this life phase, even a produce can disrupt equilibrium. But if pineapple stunned you, anticipate the reality concerning watermelon. A produce lauded for fluid replenishment, yet in specific states it could be discreetly desiccating your cerebrum and diminishing your pressure in manners that render you prone to downfall. let's examine how an item so aqueous can turn perilous. If you're persisting in viewing and valuing these revelations, kindly post numeral 1 below to signal your presence. Now, proceed to segment 4. 4. Watermelon. Not invariably replenishing. Watermelon. It's challenging to locate a produce more cherished in American summers than watermelon. Iced portions on Independence Day, seed-ejecting games with offspring, and the delectable, revitalizing bite post a sweltering garden session. It seems innocuous, even nutritious. And yes, it's brimming with moisture. But for elders, particularly those with latent cardiac concerns or using particular therapies, watermelon can subtly steer the form toward peril. Not via sweetness or tartness, but via what it extracts from your framework. As a cerebral specialist, I've become more alarmed at how frequently elder individuals unwittingly provoke their cerebrovascular hazards with edibles they presume secure. Watermelon exemplifies one of the largest fallacies. It may appear fluid restoring, but in truth, watermelon can function as a urinary promoter, signifying it prompts more frequent voiding. That's trivial for a 25-year-old, but for a 75-year-old with sensitive flow, marginal pressure, or already using fluid reducers or ACE inhibitors, that repeated voiding can induce nocturnal desiccation, among the most perilous hushed catalysts for cerebrovascular incidents. Why? Since upon desiccation, your plasma viscosifies. Envision it as molasses, sluggishly traversing slim passages. Viscous plasma advances lethargically, affording it extended duration to generate thrombi, especially in conduits already rigidified by years. The cerebrum, already responsive to oxygenation shifts, grows even more exposed when flow decelerates or halts. And this holds particularly during nocturnal hours when innate flow wanes and pressure descends. Permit me to describe Mr. Howard Larkin, an 82-year-old former mail carrier from Indiana. He executed what he believed correct via daily ambulation, evading refined sweetness, and indulging solely in nutritious edibles. One routine he cherished was consuming 2 or 3 ample watermelon segments post-dinner to temper him and sustain hydration. But what escaped him was his concurrent use of a urinary promoter for slight cardiac insufficiency. Amid the therapy and the innate fluid drawing of watermelon, Howard's form expelled excess moisture nocturnally. One dawn, Howard emerged with intense vertigo. Upon attempting to rise, he toppled. In medical care, his pressure was perilously reduced, and analyses displayed concentrated hemoglobin indicators, signifying his plasma had viscosified from desiccation. Imaging uncovered a petite ischemic cerebrovascular event, probably from a thrombus in his constricted conduits amid slumber. His watermelons surprisingly opposed his assumption, desiccating rather than restoring him. What's graver is that the cerebrovascular incident impaired Howard's equilibrium and synchronization. Though he endured, he now ambulates with support and depends on aid for routine duties. A gentleman who merely a week prior tended his turf independently. I recount this not to unduly frighten. I share because most elders overlook that even nutritious edibles can turn hazardous when meshing with years, therapies, and moments. Watermelon ingested late, especially post-therapies that already diminish fluid, forges a concealed hazard. Viscous plasma, reduced pressure, decelerated flow. The trio enabling thrombi to develop hushedly and assault nocturnally. Thus, if watermelon pleases you, indulge prudently, consume earlier in the day, and invariably combine with electrolytes, like a dash of salt or palm fluid. If using urinary promoters, confer with your physician pre-daily adoption. And crucially, heed your form. Dawn vertigo, nocturnal aridness, or arising bewildered aren't standard. They signal cautions, since even a produce that's 90% moisture can turn a hushed pilferer of cerebral wellness. And the direst element? You won't sense it until delay. Now, if this astonished you, anticipate discussing a produce essentially promoted as the emblem of nutritious dawn meals, the timeless U.S. orange. But within that vivid hue lurks a concealed substance that might be meddling with your cardiac and cerebral therapies, and could be laying groundwork for perils far graver than most envision. 5. Oranges. Citrus clashes. Oranges. Oranges have endured as emblems of wellness in U.S. homes. A serving of newly extracted juice at breakfast, a dish of orange segments on the counter, or the traditional orange in holiday gifts. For generations, they've been viewed as Earth's vitamin C wonder, But for elder individuals, particularly those using cardiac or hypertension therapies, oranges can subtly morph into a chemical blend that ignites hazardous sequences within the form, encompassing those culminating in thrombi and cerebrovascular incidents. The issue transcends mere sweetness. Though one ample orange or juice serving can propel glucose elevations, it's also an innate element in citrus called furanocoumarin, and it's an item most elders haven't encountered. Furanocoumarin can meddle with your form's metabolism of certain therapies, notably statins, calcium passage blockers, and anticoagulants. This signifies that rather than your form handling your therapy securely and steadily, it might retain excess, heightening toxicity, or expel it swiftly, nullifying its efficacy. That clash can prove fatal, not abruptly, but gradually, hushedly, by forging states where plasma destabilizes, conduits contract erratically, or thrombi initiate sans alert. As a cerebral specialist, I've observed excessive patients suffer repercussions from blending nutritious produce with potent therapies. One such was Mr. Elmer Bryant, 79, a former transport operator from Georgia. A fine individual with a warm grin, Elmer used atorvastatin for lipid excess and losartan for pressure. He also valued innate living. Each dawn he'd commence with a lofty serving of newly extracted orange juice, his ray in a vessel, as he phrased it. But what Elmer ignored was that the furanocoumarin in that juice hindered his hepatic organ from metabolizing his therapies. His pressure remedies accumulated in circulation, amplifying their impacts. Concurrently, the statin gathered in his musculature and veins, heightening swelling and impacting his conduits. One dawn, post-mild vertigo for days, Elmer rose from his seat and toppled. He was conveyed to emergency with impaired articulation and bewilderment. Imaging displayed a gentle ischemic cerebrovascular event, and analyses indicated perilously raised drug concentrations, not from excess intake, but because the orange juice obstructed hepatic clearance. His plasma had destabilized. It coursed erratically, and indeed, it generated a thrombus lodging in a slim cerebral conduit. Upon elucidating to Elmer and spouse, they were astounded. "All my existence, I deemed orange juice beneficial for me," he remarked, "and it once was. But the maturing form differs. What suited at 40 doesn't invariably suit at 70 or 80, particularly with therapies now involved. This explains why grapefruit, bitter oranges, and even standard navel oranges, when habitual, warrant careful deliberation in elders using therapies. The hepatic organ slows, loses efficiency, and therapy food clash perils escalate markedly with years. For those beyond 60, I now advise sparse orange consumption and never merging with therapies sans physician dialogue. If citrus appeals, select reduced risk variants like tangerines, or add a minor splash of juice to fluid over full servings. And if using any prescribed remedies, inquire of your physician if citrus might meddle. Since the reality is, it's not solely your remedy storage that counts. It's your produce dish. One straightforward, benevolent routine reiterated daily can be the concealed force propelling your cerebrum toward disaster. If this concerns you, it ought to, but awareness empowers. By merely altering consumption manner and timing for certain produces, you can sharply lower your hazard. And if you believe orange's sole everyday produce with a shadowy aspect, persist, because the subsequent is a produce frequently distributed in medical facilities, lauded for intestinal wellness and vitality, but could be discreetly eroding your neural safeguards. Let's examine apples, and the sweetness snare no one's alerting you to. 6. Apples. Unexpected sweetness snare. Apples. The emblem of U.S. wellness, correct? An apple daily wards off the healer. You've absorbed it lifelong. Firm, succulent, and simple to consume, apples get distributed in hospitals, featured in elder meal initiatives, and prepared caringly by young ones desiring your wellness. But for elder individuals, particularly those past 60 handling pressure, diabetes, or neural shifts, apples might not prove as innocuous as they seem. In reality, the incorrect apple type, ingested improperly, can subtly heighten your cerebrovascular hazard by unsettling your glucose and vascular steadiness perilously. Observe. Not every apple equates. Though apples harbor roughage and certain nourishments, many favored U.S. types such as Fuji, Honeycrisp, and Gala get cultivated for delectability, not sustenance. These apples possess an elevated glycemic burden, signifying they inundate your veins with innate sweetness swifter than your maturing framework manages. And if consumed solo, especially lacking protein or salubrious lipid to moderate processing, you initiate a swift glucose elevation trailed by a plunge. This abrupt rise and fall impacts beyond vitality. It influences your pressure, vascular swelling, and plasma thickness. Upon glucose elevation, your plasma acidifies and adheres. Your insulin surges and your conduits contract gradually. This cycle, reiterated daily, impairs the sensitive conduit interiors, encompassing those to your cerebrum. Minute fissures can emerge, and upon that, your form generates thrombi for mending. In youthful individuals, the framework rebounds swiftly, but for elders with already slimmer, rigid conduits, those thrombi can turn cerebrovascular catalysts,